The silence that spoke louder than words. Evening lights of the city flickered as cameras clicked outside a grand gallery where Alexandra Grant was set to present her latest collection. Reporters crowded near the entrance, waiting for her appearance. Alexandra stepped out of the car, tall and graceful, her silver hair glowing beneath the flashes. But what struck everyone was not her art or her calm walk into the building. It was her silence. People expected questions to be answered. After all, rumors had been circling for weeks, whispers about her and Keanu Reeves. Whispers about distance, about change, about what their relationship truly meant. Yet when the reporters shouted his name, Alexandra simply offered a quiet smile and walked on without a word. The silence was deafening. The internet exploded within hours. Hashtags trended worldwide. Why won't she speak? What is she hiding? Everyone had theories, but no one had the truth. Inside the gallery, Alexandra moved among the paintings she had poured her soul into. Her hands brushed lightly against the frames, as though the art itself was her answer. But deep inside, her heart was restless. She had always admired Keanu's way of living, quiet, humble, never letting fame decide his worth. But now, she was the one holding silence, and it felt like the world wanted to break it open. Keanu, on the other hand, was on a film set miles away. He had heard about the event, heard about her silence, and knew exactly what people were saying. Yet he didn't call her to explain, didn't demand she speak. He respected her choice, even if it left him in the shadows of speculation. Late that night, Alexandra sat alone in her studio. The gallery was over, the cameras gone, but the storm online was only growing. She scrolled through headlines that questioned her loyalty, her love, even her character. Her chest ached, but she whispered to herself, sometimes silence protects more than words ever could, because the truth was, Alexandra's silence wasn't about shame or anger. It was about something she couldn't yet share, something fragile, something that belonged only to her and Keanu until the right moment arrived. As she set her phone aside, she looked over at a small box on her desk. Inside lay letters, handwritten notes from Keanu, words never meant for cameras, words that carried his heart in quiet lines. Those notes were her anchor, the reason she stayed silent when the world demanded noise. But what Alexandra didn't know was that her silence was already creating waves, larger than she imagined. In protecting her truth, she was also setting the stage for questions, doubts, and conflicts that would soon push both her and Keanu into choices they never expected to face. The next morning, the whispers reached the set. A crew member casually mentioned it to Keanu, expecting him to brush it off. Instead, Keanu paused, his eyes distant. He didn't explain, didn't react outwardly, but inside, he felt the shift. Alexandra's silence wasn't just being noticed, it was being questioned. He walked to his trailer after filming, sat at the small table, and pulled out a notebook. His pen moved slowly, deliberately. He wrote not for the world, not for the reporters, but for Alexandra, a letter she had not yet seen. Your silence is your strength, but it also carries weight. I trust it. I trust you. But know this, when you are ready, I will stand beside you, no matter the noise outside. Until then, let your silence be ours, not theirs. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. He knew she would receive it soon, and somewhere deep in both their hearts, they felt that the silence they were holding together was not emptiness. It was a choice, a fragile shield against a world that demanded answers. But every shield has its cracks, and soon the world would find a way to press harder. Asterisk, when silence becomes the story. The following week, Alexandra's silence had turned into its own headline. Every magazine, every talk show, every gossip page spun its own version of the truth. Some claimed she and Keanu had quietly broken up. Others suggested she was hiding pain. A few even went further, painting her silence as betrayal. Alexandra read none of it, but her friends did. Messages filled her phone. You should say something. People are twisting it. Alexandra, you can't just stay quiet forever. But Alexandra believed words given to the world could never be taken back. Once spoken, they belonged to everyone, no longer hers. And her relationship with Keanu wasn't for cameras, it wasn't for strangers, it was for them. Still, the pressure grew. Keanu, meanwhile, stayed focused on filming. He worked long hours, his face calm, his spirit steady. But when he returned to his trailer each evening, he read the latest headlines. And though he never admitted it to the crew, it cut into him, not because of what they said about him, but because of what they implied about her. One evening, His co-star gently asked, "Why doesn't she just clear it up? It would be so simple." Keanu looked at the floor for a long time before answering, because sometimes silence says more than explanations ever could. But he knew silence could also be twisted. 2 nights later, Alexandra was invited to another event. She told herself she would only focus on the art, only smile politely, only keep her dignity. But the questions came faster this time. "Alexandra, why won't you talk about Keanu? Are you do-over? Is your silence a confession?" She didn't respond. She smiled faintly and walked past, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Yet the cameras captured every second. Within hours, clips of her walking away were everywhere. Titled with cruel captions, "Alexandra refuses to defend Keanu. The storm became louder. Back on set." Keanu's assistant handed him a tablet with the clip. He watched it once, his eyes narrowing slightly. When the video ended, he placed it down, his face calm but his voice heavy. "They're not attacking her silence anymore. They're attacking her character." That night, Keanu called Alexandra. She answered, her voice tired but warm. "I know what you're going to say," she whispered. "Then let me say it anyway." He replied softly, "Your silence is yours to keep, Alexandra. You don't owe anyone your words, but I won't let them use your quiet against you. If the world wants noise, they'll hear it from me." Her breath caught. "Keanu, if you speak, they'll only drag you into it deeper." "Maybe," he admitted, "but I'd rather be dragged in the fire beside you than stand outside while they burn you alone." Alexandra's chest tightened. She wanted to stop him, to protect him from the noise. But his voice carried a certainty that left her silent once more. 2 days later, on the film set, during a press break, Keanu did something no one expected. When asked about Alexandra's silence, he finally spoke. His words were calm, his tone steady. "She doesn't need to explain herself to anyone. Alexandra is not defined by rumors. She is not defined by silence. She is defined by her art, her heart, and her truth. And anyone who questions that is only revealing their own emptiness, not hers." The room fell silent. Reporters who had been waiting for drama instead found themselves stunned by his quiet defense. Within hours, the internet exploded again, but this time differently. Hashtags of support for Alexandra began to trend. Fans wrote messages of respect. Strangers defended her choice. Alexandra saw it unfold from her studio. She placed her phone down, her eyes filling with tears. Not because the noise had stopped, it never really stopped, but because Keanu had chosen to stand in it with her. She whispered softly into the empty room, "Thank you," but deep inside, she knew her silence was no longer just her choice. It was now part of a larger story, and stories, once unleashed, have a way of leading to places no one can predict. When Defense Turns into Freth World was still echoing with Keanu's words. His calm defense of Alexandra had silenced some of the noise, but it had also stirred a new storm. Reporters praised him for his loyalty, fans admired his devotion, but critics twisted his statement into something else. If Keanu spoke for her, then maybe she really did have something to hide. Alexandra read the headlines in silence. Her phone buzzed endlessly, friends checking on her, strangers demanding answers, reporters circling like hawks. She placed the phone face down on her desk and walked to her canvas. Painting usually gave her peace, but today the brush trembled in her hand. She remembered Keanu's voice on the phone, steady and gentle. "I'd rather be dragged in the fire beside you than stand outside while they burn you alone." He had done exactly that. He had stepped into the flames for her, and though part of her was grateful, another part of her feared the cost. On set, Keanu felt the weight too. The crew treated him with respect as always, but he could see the glances, hear the whispers. One co-star even asked quietly, "Aren't you afraid this will hurt your career?" Keanu paused, his eyes thoughtful. Then he answered simply, "Some things matter more than careers." That night, Alexandra received another wave of questions when she arrived at a charity event. She had promised herself she wouldn't avoid public life. Completely silence didn't mean hiding. But the moment she stepped onto the carpet, the questions began again. "Alexandra, do you agree with Keanu's statement? Is your silence hiding something deeper? Why won't you defend yourself directly?" She held her chin high, her calm smile steady. But when one reporter shouted, "Does your silence mean you don't love him?" the words cut deeper than she expected. Alexandra froze. Love. The one thing she had always guarded privately. Her silence had never been about doubting Keanu, never about a lack of love. It was the opposite. Her silence was her way of protecting what was sacred between them. But the world didn't see it that way. When the clip of that moment spread online, people saw her pause, her hesitation, and turned it into proof. She didn't answer. Maybe it's true. Keanu saw the clip the next morning. He sat quietly in his trailer, watching the way she froze under the question. His heart ached not because of what others thought, but because he knew how much it hurt her to have their love questioned. He picked up his phone, dialing her number. When she answered, her voice was heavy. Keanu, maybe my silence is doing more harm than good. He closed his eyes, his voice soft but firm. No, your silence is yours, Alexandra. You don't owe the world your words. What you owe yourself is peace. Don't let them steal it from you. But they're twisting everything, she whispered. Let them twist. He said gently, truth doesn't bend, even when people do. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alexandra whispered, how do you always stay so calm? He gave a small smile she couldn't see. Because storms don't last forever, and because you're worth standing in them for. Her tears finally fell, not from weakness, but from the depth of his words. She knew then that his defense wasn't just a public gesture. It was a promise. But as she ended the call and looked out the window of her studio, she noticed something that made her breath catch. Car sat across the street. It had been there before, parked for hours. She dismissed it once as coincidence, twice as bad luck. But now it felt different. Someone was watching, and suddenly, Alexandra realized her silence might not just be about the media anymore. Something deeper, something more dangerous was pressing closer. Astor's silence meets danger. The next evening, Alexandra sat in her studio, staring at the car still parked across the street. It hadn't moved in hours. Every time she glanced up from her canvas, it was there quiet, watching, waiting. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. Maybe someone lived nearby. Maybe it was an innocent mistake. But deep inside, her instincts whispered otherwise. Her phone buzzed. It was Keanu. His voice, calm as always, flowed through the line. I just wrapped for the day. How are you? She hesitated, then whispered, there's a car outside. It's been there for too long. Keanu's tone shifted instantly. No panic, just steady urgency. Don't go near the windows. Don't open the door. I'll be there. Keanu, you don't have to. Alexandra. He interrupted softly, but firmly. You don't need to carry this alone. Stay inside. I'm on my way. She put the phone down, her heart racing. Every sound in the house seemed louder, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint noise of the city outside. 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock at the back door. Alexandra rushed to open it. Keanu stood there, his dark jacket blending into the night, his eyes scanning the room quickly before they softened at the sight of her. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded, though her voice trembled. Yes. But the car? He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Let me check. Together, they peeked through the curtain. The car was still there, its windows tinted. Keanu's single quotes, jaw tightened. It's not coincidence. Before Alexandra could respond, the headlights of the car flicked on. The engine roared to life. For a brief second, the car stayed in place, almost haunting them. Then it pulled away slowly, disappearing into the night. Alexandra exhaled shakily. What do they want from me? Keanu turned to her, his voice steady. Maybe it's not about your silence. Maybe it's about what your silence is hiding. Her chest tightened. But I'm not hiding anything. I'm only protecting what matters. Keanu's gaze held hers, deep and unshakable. I know, but sometimes protection looks like a secret to people who don't understand. And the world doesn't like mysteries. They push until they break something. She sank into her chair, her hands trembling. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Keanu crouched beside her, his hand gently covering hers. Then let me help you. We'll face it together. The silence, the noise, even the shadows outside. You don't have to fight this alone anymore. Her eyes filled with tears. For weeks, she had carried the weight of her choice in isolation. But now, here he was, steady as ever, offering to carry part of it. Keanu, she whispered, what if they never stop? What if they push until there's nothing left of us? His expression softened, but his voice carried quiet strength. Then they'll find out we bend, but we don't break. In that moment, the storm of headlines, the whispers of strangers, and the threat of the car outside all felt smaller compared to the quiet promise in his words. But even as she leaned into his embrace, Alexandra knew the silence was no longer just hers. It had grown into something bigger, something that could no longer be ignored. And as dawn approached, One truth settled in her heart silence may protect for a while, but eventually it demands a choice to keep holding it or to finally speak. When silence breaks morning after the car vanished, Alexandra woke with heavy eyes. She hadn't slept much. Every sound outside had kept her on edge. But when she stepped into her studio, she found Keanu already there, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee in his hands. "You stayed," she whispered. He looked up, his expression calm. "I wasn't going to leave you alone." For a moment, she just watched him. His presence, steady and unshakable, made her feel safer than any locked door or alarm system ever could. But she also knew his life was already filled with demands, with cameras, with people pulling him in every direction. And now he had stepped fully into her storm. By noon, the world outside had grown louder again. News outlets had caught wind of the car incident. Though no details were confirmed, rumors spread like wildfire. Was Alexandra being targeted? Was her silence tied to something bigger? When Keanu returned to his film set later that day, reporters waited outside. He walked calmly through them, but one question made him stop. "Keanu, is Alexandra's silence putting her in danger?" He didn't answer right away. The cameras clicked, waiting. Then his voice cut through, steady and clear. "Her silence isn't the problem. The world's impatience with respect is the problem. Alexandra owes no one her words. If you want to write something true, write that she is one of the strongest people I've ever known, and that I stand with her." The clip spread everywhere within hours. Fans flooded social media with support, praising his defense. Yet, as always, there were critics. If she has nothing to hide, why won't she just speak? Keanu can't protect her forever. Alexandra read the comments late into the night. Her heart ached, not for herself, but for him. He had once again stepped into the fire, and she feared how much heat he could endure. When he returned that evening, she looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You keep standing for me, Keanu. But how many times can you do this before it breaks you?" He placed the coffee cup down, his gaze never leaving hers. "This isn't breaking me, Alexandra. What breaks me is the thought of you facing all this without me." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "But if I keep silent, they'll never stop asking. And if I speak, I lose the one thing that belongs only to us." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "Then maybe it's not about silence or words. Maybe it's about choosing when and how to speak. Your truth doesn't have to belong to everyone, but maybe it's time to give them enough to stop chasing shadows." His words settled into her heart. He wasn't asking her to break her silence completely. He was reminding her that she had the power to control what part of her truth the world saw. The next day, Alexandra walked into a public event. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted her name. But this time, she didn't walk past in silence. She stopped. She didn't speak about rumors. She didn't confirm or deny anything about her private life. Instead, her voice was calm, steady, but filled with quiet power. "Silence is not absence," she said. "Sometimes silence is protection. Sometimes it is love. And sometimes it is the only answer the world deserves. I will continue to live my truth quietly, with respect, and with the people who matter most." Nothing more needs to be said. The room went silent. Her words, though few, struck deeper than explanations ever could. Keanu, watching from afar, felt a weight lift from his chest. She had spoken not to give away what was theirs, but to draw a line the world could no longer cross. That night, Alexandra sat in her studio again, Keanu by her side. She looked at him with a faint smile. "I didn't break the silence completely, but I gave them just enough." He nodded softly, his hand brushing hers. "And that's more than enough." But deep inside, both of them knew the silence may have shifted, but the world would still watch. And soon, the choice to keep protecting their truth or to reveal more would come again. The truth behind her silence days after Alexandra's short but powerful statement. The noise outside quieted just a little. People replayed her words, debated their meaning, and filled headlines with endless guesses. But for Alexandra, it was not about calming the world. It was about protecting what was still hers. Yet even in the quiet, a truth still rested heavy on her heart, one that Keanu did not know. One that explained why her silence had been so fierce, why she held back even when the world pushed. One night, as rain tapped softly against the studio windows, Alexandra sat with Keanu by her side. He was flipping through one of her sketchbooks, his calm presence filling the room. She watched him for a long moment before finally speaking. "There's something I haven't told you." she whispered. Keanu looked up, his eyes steady, patient. Then tell me now. Her throat tightened, but she pressed on. My silence. It wasn't only about us. It wasn't only about protecting our love. It was about protecting someone else too. His brows furrowed. Who? Her voice trembled. My family. Before you and I, there was a time when someone close to me was dragged into the media storm because of me. They never healed from it. I swore I would never let it happen again. So when the questions came about you, about us, I thought if I stayed silent, I could shield both of us. But in doing so, I made it look like I was hiding. Or worse, ashamed. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued. I wasn't ashamed, Keanu. I was terrified. Terrified of losing you to the world's hunger for stories. Keanu set the sketchbook down and moved closer, his hand covering hers. Alexandra, you don't need to carry that fear alone anymore. The world will always talk. It will always twist. But silence or words, none of it changes what's between us. Only we can decide that. Her tears finally spilled, soft and unguarded. So you don't think my silence made us weaker? He shook his head, his voice calm, but filled with warmth. No, your silence made us stronger, because it showed me you were willing to carry the fire alone to protect what mattered. But you don't have to do that anymore. From now on, we carry it together. She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders felt lighter. The next morning, the world was still buzzing, but something had shifted. Alexandra no longer feared their whispers. Her silence no longer felt like a shield. It felt like a choice, one she now shared with Keanu, not one she bore alone. When they stepped out together days later at a small event, they didn't need to say much. They walked side by side, their quiet smiles stronger than any spoken words. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted, but this time Alexandra didn't feel cornered. She felt free. Because now, her silence was no longer about fear. It was about love, about holding sacred the things that belonged only to them. And as Keanu gently reached for her hand in front of the flashing cameras, Alexandra realized something powerful. The world might always talk, but the truth was theirs alone. Sometimes, silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes, silence is the loudest way of saying this is ours and no one can take it from us.